Marriage is not only an institution, it's also a process. So it's difficult to define marriage. What is marriage to Mr. A, it's not marriage to Mr. B.
It's constantly shifting what normal marriage really is. It depends so much upon context, social, historical context. And so that even when there's something that we consider normal in the sense of girls should not be married, what it means to be a girl, how a girl is defined, how a woman is defined, continues to shift depending on who's involved in the debates, when the debates are taking place and why. So that even the definition of normal marriage isn't concrete, continues to shift.
There is no set pattern of normal marriage.
Well, I'm not sure if there is a normal marriage. I'm not sure what normal marriage might mean, only because it takes so many different forms in so many different ways. And normal by whose perspective?
There's nothing normal in marriage.
It's so very difficult to give a definition of normal marriage that, of course, the study of forced marriage helps us to have new perspectives on that, but, we knew that already.
There is no normal marriage. Yeah? The study of forced marriage forces us to acknowledge that in having a normal marriage, we're imposing a respectability, a normativity, a hegemonic normativity on what we understand. In having forced marriage and assuming a normal marriage, we're putting a stamp of authority and legitimacy on what we believe is marriage.
And the ways in which in France, supposedly, forced marriages force women later on into adultery and therefore have a destabilizing influence on society and on morals.
That when a slave woman has a relationship with her master, and this was very common in Mauritania and southern Morocco, the children are born not just legitimate, which is what's important to the master, but they're born free, which is what's important to the woman. So this is one way in which a slave contributes to the free population.
So language does matter, but we need to think critically about what that means in various historical and social contexts.
The terms mean a lot, and I think that they raise issues about how we can interrogate the concepts, what they mean, and how to situate different forms of marriage in different points in time constrained by wider economic forces.
The distinctions between forced marriage and consensual are often very blurry.
It's the vulnerability of women that seems to cut across the divide between the supposed, the two different kinds of marriages.
And it is dangerous because it prevents us from investigating and exposing harmful practices, inequality and discrimination within so-called normal marriage.
There are really a lot of competing understandings of consent. Some people think that consent to marriage or to sexual interaction should be vested in families. Some people want to see a kind of individual autonomy over sexuality, and some people are very invested in a kind of religious understanding.
So one of the things that I've been looking at really is trying to understand what girls think that marriage is and should be, and how they actually try to sort of explore what we would call tactical agency within these forced marriages, so how they kind of bargain between each other with the other wives, how they bargain with their husband, with other soldiers, and try to find some form of agency and protection within these marriages.
We want to, first of all, learn as much as we can about the phenomenon of forced marriage and early child marriage, and specifically where that phenomena intersects with modern slavery. So, even in our own anti-slavery movement, we don't often talk about forced marriage. We don't often talk about that condition of life that's so similar to so many modern slavery forms we see.
And so forced marriage, I think, it's useful in that it really brings the issues of power relations to the foreground. But I find that my own work, at least, and I think that of many others, kind of problematizes some of that and suggests that while politically that might be useful for certain kinds of projects to talk about forced marriage, it also, again, masks the complexities of what's happening on the ground.
One of the conclusions that I've come to is that forced marriage as a label has a lot of baggage that comes with it. And the fact is that no choice that we make is ever unconstrained. We're never completely free in our actions and in our decisions. So the choices that women in Bamako make, whether to go along with the marriage that someone else has essentially arranged for them and maybe presented them as a fait accompli, whether to resist it and use what weapons they have to get out of it. Those women are always operating under very limited choices at their disposal.
And what's really interesting is that there were cases of forced marriage during the genocide in Rwanda that, because everything was called rape, were never explored and were never prosecuted. So our partners in Rwanda now are looking at those cases and interviewing women now almost 20 years after the genocide to find out what their experiences were of forced marriage.
One thing that was also common was, men running away from their husbands at a certain period of time, and all these women would go to the courts to demand for some form of redress.
We need to problematize the concept of consent, and we also need to deconstruct consent and think about what consent might mean in various social and historical contexts.